My life is completely screwed up. I had just gotten home from work when my wife of 12 years, Lisa, started yelling at me. I had been waiting for this moment with dread, but knew that one day it would come. In all honesty, my wife had a right to be furious. I was cheating on her. But in my defense, she was cheating on me, and her cheating started at least 6 months before mine. And while I had known about Lisa's infidelity for years, she apparently only now found out about mine. Like I said, my life is complete shit, and I'm sure none of you will believe me when I tell you about it. Hell, if I didn't live like that myself, I wouldn't believe it either. As soon as I opened the front door, Lisa screamed at the top of her lungs, "You're a fucking boarder." From that point on, the conversation went off the rails. In fact, thinking back on it, I can say that Lisa's opening words were the kindest thing she said about me during her tirade. Although I only caught every third word, it was pretty clear that Lisa had learned that I had a special friend, and she wasn't too pleased. Even if I managed to get a word in edgewise, I couldn't think of anything to say to calm the situation. So I just stood there, staring at the floor, trying to figure out what the best way to retreat would be if Lisa started raging. Finally, when Lisa had calmed down, she said, "Well, what can you say for yourself? Why don't I just file for divorce?" "Well, let's start with that," I said softly. "I know you've been having an affair for the last 9 years. So, I agree, we should probably get a divorce." What are you talking about?" Lisa was stunned, and the color disappeared from her face. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out some pictures, which I gave to Lisa. They were pictures of her infidelity. I didn't know what to expect, but what I got completely surprised me. I should have explained that Lisa was incredibly rich and could send an army of lawyers against me. But instead of the explosion of anger I expected, Lisa dropped the pictures and started sobbing. Then she looked at me with an expression of utter agony and loss. What she said next completely stunned me. "I don't want a divorce. I love you." Then she ran off to our bedroom. Her reaction stunned me and left me even more confused than usual. Lisa is the most beautiful woman I've ever known. I never imagined we would ever end up together. And when we got married, I expected Lisa to get tired of our relationship and kick me to the curb after a year or two. One of the peculiarities of our marriage was that Lisa's family was incredibly wealthy and insisted on a prenup. I, of course, agreed to it. However, one clause almost made me leave. Lisa insisted that the prenup specified that there would be no children from this marriage, and I finally agreed. I thought about that clause for a long time, but by then I was hopelessly in love with Lisa. By the end of this story, however, I would have 4 children. Did I mention that my life was completely screwed up? I suppose I should give a little background on all this. Lisa Grawa is my wife. My name is David Todman. Of course, my wife didn't take my last name. Long story short, Lisa's family owns one of the most exclusive perfume companies in the world, and the last name is the brand. And since Lisa is co-owner of that business, Grawa Sense, it made sense for her to keep her maiden name. I wasn't thrilled with the idea at first, but over the years things have worked out just fine. Since Lisa has kept her last name and I have kept mine, a lot of people don't realize we are married. It gives me a certain amount of anonymity. I really meant what I said at the beginning of this story. When we got married, I couldn't believe Lisa chose me. She was a stunning beauty, and still is. Lisa was almost 6 feet tall, with long black hair and the deepest blue eyes you'd ever seen. She had the figure of a model with slightly larger breasts. In fact, as a teenager, Lisa had modeled for a while. I'm not bad looking, but I'm not a movie star. My height is an inch over 6 feet, my hair is sandy colored, and I keep myself in shape. Still, Lisa was out of my league, and I knew it. I met Lisa at a party thrown by my college roommate and his wife in the Hamptons. He was a commodities trader and doing very well. His wife Beth went to Vassar with Lisa and they were very close friends. When I was introduced to Lisa, I was as impressed as every other man in the room. She just radiated sex and beauty. She made all the single guys and most of the married guys drool. But like I said, she was out of my league, so I started socializing with the other single women in the room. I have a friend who once advised me to only date girls in my league or even poach them in the lower leagues. Otherwise, you'll waste your evenings socializing with a woman who will leave with someone else. I know it sounds like a chicken shit dating philosophy, and I don't share it wholeheartedly. However, I will admit to adhering to a modified version of it. I simply categorize women based on whether or not I feel they are out of my league. Why would I waste my time on a girl who blows me off anyway? I believe in being realistic. The only exception is if there's a girl who is clearly out of my league but known to be easy, then I'll give it a shot. But every time I turned around that evening, Lisa was at my elbow. The first few times I wrote it off as coincidence, but by the fourth time it was clear that Lisa was interested in me. I was flattered, but at the same time I felt awkward. I assumed she was just moonlighting, and when she got bored with me, she'd dump me back. I wasn't interested in being someone's pet project for a month. Maybe that was her plan, but I didn't let it go far enough to discuss it. And yet, after that party, Lisa started stalking me. Like I said, I'm quite a good-looking guy, but what the hell did Lisa Grawa want with me? I was just a software salesman. Don't get me wrong, I'm a damn good software salesman. And after only 4 years with the same company, I was one of the senior sales directors with a salary in the neighborhood of $5,000. But that's pennies compared to what Lisa earns. Her salary, excluding bonuses, is $40 million a year. So I think you can see why I thought Lisa was just playing me. Perhaps my disinterest spurred Lisa on, but she eventually wore me down. It took her 4 weeks to convince me to go out with her. It took 6 months before we slept together and a little over a year before we were married. It was an embarrassingly extravagant wedding. It had 600 guests, and I heard it cost about $6 million. But for one of the heirs to the Grawa fortune, that's nothing. Of course, her family insisted that I sign a prenup. I know Lisa was embarrassed to ask me, but I had no objections. I understood the necessity of having one, plus I was making a good living myself. So her money was of no concern to me. Still, when I agreed to sign the contract, Lisa was happy beyond belief. She told me that her family would disown her if she married me without a contract. But according to Lisa, she was going to marry me no matter what. Still, I couldn't help but wonder how long our marriage would last. According to the prenup, if we divorced before 3 years, I would only get $500,000. That completely shocked me. I had never heard anyone put the word only in front of $500,000. But it got better from there. Each year we stayed married for 3 years, I received another $500,000 or a pro rata share for the percentage of the year we were still husband and wife. In the event of a divorce, Lisa could make no claim on my assets. On the other hand, I couldn't make any claim against her assets either. But the best part of the whole arrangement was that I was sleeping with the most beautiful woman in the world, and if she threw me out on the street, I would receive at least $500,000. Of course, the prenuptial agreement stipulated that we both agreed to forego having children. Although I eventually agreed to this condition, Lisa's parents were clearly unhappy with the no-child clause. But Lisa didn't have a close relationship with her parents. Apparently, she only saw them at board meetings and claimed that they liked her brothers better than she liked herself. Besides, she had already had a battle with them about not having children years ago. Not surprisingly, we saw them very infrequently over the years. And when they did come to visit, it was very awkward, especially for me, because they looked at me as something lower than pond scum. I have to say that the first 3 years of marriage were absolutely wonderful. During those blissful years, I truly believed that she loved me. But shortly after the 3rd anniversary of our marriage, I discovered that Lisa was cheating on me. Our marriage was very unconventional. Lisa traveled a lot for company. I would say she was gone about a week out of every month. And in the early years, I traveled with her as often as possible. Sometimes she would spend 5 or 6 weeks at home in a row, but that was rare. However, whenever she came home, she would wear me out in the bedroom. My discovery of Lisa's infidelity began with a picture in the newspaper. Because Lisa is a personality, she is often mentioned or pictured in the society pages. So I used to look at that section of the newspaper every day. One day I just glanced at a picture from a party in Paris and almost missed it. I ended up needing a magnifying glass to confirm what I thought the photo depicted. On the right side of this photo, I saw someone who looked like Lisa. Using the magnifying glass, I confirmed it. You might be saying, what's the big deal? It was a big deal because at that moment Lisa was supposed to be in Japan negotiating something for the company. Nevertheless, there could have been many reasons why Lisa was in Paris. But I couldn't think of any reason why she changed her trip and not told me about it. Still, I needed to know more. It could have been a simple last-minute mistake in her schedule. But I had to find out what was going on. When we first got married, Lisa had asked me to quit my job so I could travel with her. I told her I didn't want to be a kept man. Eventually she stopped asking. One of the things about being married to a family like Lisa's is that you have almost unlimited resources. However, I didn't want to use Lisa's money because I knew she was very meticulous and would find out if I did. But I had my own checking account that my paycheck was deposited into. I mostly used that money to buy Lisa birthday and Christmas presents. It's not an easy task when you're buying for someone who has everything. It kept me awake, I couldn't sleep or eat. I needed to know what was going on, so I used my personal funds and hired the firm of a private investigator. Even so, I had to be careful. I chose a firm that I knew Grawa had never used before, a respected St. Louis firm. After I discovered the picture in the paper, I realized that Lisa's schedule had become much larger than when we first got married. With the new schedule, she was gone an average of 2 weeks out of every month. Yet, I was confused because our sex life was still great. Lisa always seemed genuinely upset when she had to leave and very happy when she returned. I almost convinced myself that I was being paranoid. Anyway, I found out a month later that I wasn't paranoid. I got the report with the pictures and it hurt like hell. I had never experienced pain like that. The private investigator's report revealed that Lisa's lover was Gerard Lavelle, whose family was in the banking business. They owned banks all over Europe and Gerard was president of the family holding company. Lisa and Gerard grew up together, and at one time everyone thought they were going to get married. But then Gerard and Lisa broke up. Lisa married me, and Gerard married a Greek woman named Teresa Apopoulos. Teresa's father was very much into shipping. Gerard and Therese had 3 children. According to a private investigator's report, Gerard and Lisa broke up because he wanted children and Lisa was adamant about not having them. Apparently, Gerard's family threatened to disinherit him if he agreed to Lisa's demand that he not have children. Then I read in the report that Gerard's wife had died 6 months earlier. So now Gerard was free to be with Lisa. For 5 days I walked around depressed, trying to figure out what was going on. Apparently Gerard was Lisa's first love, and apparently they had resumed their relationship. I didn't understand why Lisa hadn't filed for divorce. In fact, I was completely confused because every time she came home, Lisa smothered me with love. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn that this woman loved only me. Not only did Lisa seem genuinely happy to see me, but our lovemaking was amazing. You're beginning to realize how fucked up my life has been, but it's only going to get worse from here. My first reaction to the private investigator's report was to meet Lisa and divorce her. But I thought about it for a long time and came up with 3 reasons that kept me from doing the deed. First, I still loved Lisa, and when we were together, I felt that she really loved me. Second, the sex was mind-blowing, and finally, the prenup. From a purely mercantile standpoint, I made $1,370 for every day I was married to Lisa. I finally decided what I was going to do after Lisa tried to destroy me with sex before I flew off on another trip. I mentally said, screw it, I'll stay married, but I won't be faithful. Even after making this decision, I still doubted whether I could really go through with cheating on Lisa. One day, as I was pondering my dilemma, one of my saleswomen came into my office. Her name was Thelma Johnson, and she was quite an attractive woman. Thelma wasn't even close to Lisa, but she had a hot body and a warm, friendly personality. While Thelma was a size 8.5, Lisa was a size 11 or 12. David, you've been distracted all week, she told me. Is there anything I can do to help? I really liked Thelma, she was a great saleswoman. She had recently divorced her husband after she caught him fucking the mailwoman on the kitchen table. Needless to say, in addition to the divorce, Thelma had purchased a new kitchen table. I was surprised that she wasn't as upset about the divorce as I thought she would be. It wasn't the first time she had caught her husband with another woman. Thelma worked closely with me for over 6 months to secure a contract with Harris Enterprise. That contract secured us bonuses for the year. I knew Thelma had a soft spot for me, but we always maintained a professional relationship between us. Nevertheless, Thelma was a good listener and I decided to ask her about my dilemma with Lisa. Yeah, I admitted, I got distracted. I just found out that Lisa is cheating on me. The question on my mind is, should I divorce her or ignore it? There should be no doubt about it, Thelma said quickly. Divorce that bitch and move on with your life. It's not that simple, I explained. I signed a prenup with Lisa. Every year that I stay married to Lisa, I get $500,000. That means that every day I stay married I make about $1,400, and that's no small thing. Then I listed all the other perks of staying married to Lisa: fancy cars, parties, clothes, expensive watches, and traveling on the company jet. Thelma recognized that this was indeed something that needed to be carefully considered. She promised to think about it tonight and let me know if she came up with anything. The next day, I was still beating on my problem when Thelma walked into my office and closed the door. I think I have a solution to your problem, she said, sitting down across from me. Really, what do you think I should do about Lisa? I asked. I think you should stay with her, Thelma replied and continued, but with a few changes. Oh, and what changes do I have to make? I asked, smiling. I was sure Thelma would suggest that I stay married and just cheat on Lisa. Admittedly, I was leaning more and more toward that, but I still hadn't convinced myself that I should decide to cheat. Although I still loved Lisa, her betrayal had hurt me deeply, and I was having a hard time coming to terms with it. But what Thelma had suggested shook me to the core. As I said, I think you should stay married to Lisa, but you should have an affair of your own. I held up my hand to stop her from continuing. I already thought of that. No, my plan is much more complicated than just that, Thelma interrupted. Please let me explain and let me finish before you throw me out of your office. Okay, I said, raising my hands to her, the floor is all yours. David, I think you're struggling with this decision for 2 reasons, Thelma began. First, despite what Lisa has done, you still love her. You can't imagine life without her. Also, even though you've thought about having your own affairs many times, it doesn't satisfy you in one important aspect. You have told me several times that you really want to have children. So, just having affairs doesn't solve this desire of yours. Yes, you could get your mistress pregnant, but that would not be pretty and would almost certainly end your marriage to Lisa. That's all true, I interjected, but I don't see how it's going to help me solve my problem. I believe I can solve this problem, Thelma said, smiling warmly at me. What? Are you proposing to be my mistress? Technically, yes, she said with a sly smile. But I want so much more than that. I'm not sure I like it, I said uneasily. No, David. Let me finish. I nodded for her to continue. You've known me since before you and Lisa were married, Thelma continued. I know you think Lisa married beneath her dignity, but I never felt that way. She's damn lucky to have you, and she's just a fool to risk losing you. But since Lisa has decided to be a fool, I'm not going to pass up the opportunity. You know my dating history has been sad, to say the least. I've always gotten the worst men. I had major misgivings even before we got married last year. I felt that Fred and I weren't right for each other, but outwardly he seemed kind and loving. It wasn't until after the wedding that I found out he was a jealous and controlling asshole who couldn't keep his cool. I just nodded and let Thelma continue. I was always drawn to you, but you never showed any interest in me. We've been good friends for years, but you never thought of me in a romantic way. I had accepted that and knew I could never compete when Lisa appeared on the scene. But Lisa has let the door ajar, and I intend to see if I can walk through it before it closes. So far, Thelma's explanations had said nothing about how her plan differed from simply taking a mistress. The two things you say you want are about Lisa and having children. You have been terribly hurt by Lisa's infidelity and you want to strike back at her. At the same time, although you have not made a big deal of it, it is clear to me that you want to have children. I can provide both. After the disaster of my marriage, I decided I never want to get married again. However, I desperately want to have children. I propose to become your mistress and bear you children. I know you don't love me, but I think you care about me. We will keep our affair a secret, which will allow you to remain married to Lisa. At the same time, I will have your children. We'll both win. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I was shocked and intrigued by what Thelma was suggesting. It was completely crazy, but I liked the idea. However, I could also see the difficulties associated with it. So I began to list some of them. First of all, thank you for the offer, I said. Kindly. I'm truly flattered, and it's far more generous than I have any right to expect. But I see several problems. Let me list a few. Finances will be difficult, then there's raising the children, their family name, and what if in the future you decide you want to get married? I've realized the same problems, Thelma admitted. But let me try to solve them. As for finances, I have my own house. All I ask is that you share the cost of the children. I will put your name as the father on the birth certificates, but until you decide otherwise, they will carry my last name. While I don't think I will want to marry in the future, I am wise enough to realize that you can never say never. Therefore, I propose that we enter into a written agreement. In it, we will include a clause that will allow either of us to terminate the agreement with 6 months' notice. If I remarry, you will have the right to decide custody. If you decide to terminate our agreement, I will have custody of the children, but you will have liberal visitation rights. Either way, you will be recognized as the father. We sat and looked at each other, but neither of us said anything at once. Finally, I broke the silence. I must admit that your offer has me very intrigued. However, I'm not ready to make a commitment just yet. Why don't we go on a few dates to see if we're right for each other? Thelma agreed, and we started going out. The first few times we just had dinner and danced. Then we started going to the theater and out to dinner. I found that dating Thelma was fun. She was warm and funny. And it was certainly much better than sitting at home waiting for Lisa to return from one of her trips. On our 5th date, we had some no-nonsense sex in the car as I drove Thelma home. After the 6th date, Thelma said, "On dates we are certainly compatible. Now let's see if we are compatible in bed." Sex with Lisa could be mind-blowing, so I didn't know what to expect from Thelma. As we undressed, I realized that Thelma without clothes had a rating closer to a 9. Thelma was shorter than Lisa and chubbier. But her body was very soft and sexy. I thought I would feel guilty for cheating on Lisa, but I didn't. In fact, being with Thelma had soothed my bruised ego somewhat. The next day, Thelma entered my office glowing. Closing the door, she walked around my desk and bestowed a scalding kiss on me. "I think after last night we know we're compatible. So, what do you want to do next?" I grinned from ear to ear. "Try to find a lawyer who has nothing to do with this company or Lisa's companies. Have them draw up an agreement. Then we'll see what happens from there." Thelma smiled broadly. "I know the perfect lawyer, my brother Tim. He and I are very close. He also knows I'm a bit flighty, and he warned me against marrying Fred." So Thelma left, and I went back to work. As the days went by, I thought less and less about the idea. And since Thelma hadn't mentioned it, I figured she might have changed her mind. In any case, I wasn't going to bring it up. Besides, I was leaning more and more toward the idea that I should just divorce Lisa and take over all the financial worries. At least it wouldn't be like what happens to most husbands in divorce. They find themselves cheated in every possible way. In many cases, these men deserve to be screwed. But in many other cases, it is the wife who deserves to be burned to the ground. In my case, at least I'd be left with a lot of money. 2 weeks after our conversation, Thelma came into my office and closed the door. She placed the finished contract on my desk. "Take as much time with it as you want. Make any changes you want. If we both agree, we will sign it in the presence of my brother. He will have the necessary witnesses and a notary. I was surprised, because Thelma never said a word about the proposal after our night together, and we never went out again. I was sure the idea was dead. But now the contract was sitting on my desk. It was amazing how quickly my thoughts turned to taking Thelma as my mistress and having children with her. Thelma's brother was very thoughtful. He even touched on issues that neither Thelma nor I had ever thought about. I was struck by the question of what would happen to the children if something happened to Thelma or me. That question chased me to the bone. Tim's solution was simple. If Thelma died, Tim agreed that he and his wife would raise the children if I continued to live with Lisa. If at that point I wanted to acknowledge the children, I would have them. If I chose to stay with Lisa, I would still be given full access to any children Thelma and I had. And, if they hadn't already been told, they would know I was their father. If I were to die, the children's names would be changed to my last name. I leave them my estate, which will be held in trust until they reach the age of 25. I was still mulling over the decision when Lisa informed me on Monday that her travel schedule would increase a bit next year. That decided it for me. The next day I asked Thelma to make an appointment with her brother. The meeting with Thelma's brother, Tim, was very businesslike. Regardless of what he personally thought of the agreement, it was clear that he loved his sister and was willing to do anything to make her happy. "David, you lucky son of a bitch," Tim said, shaking his head. "I've seen pictures of your wife, and she's gorgeous. And my sister is beautiful, too. God, I'm jealous." I laughed at Tim's words, but Thelma only glanced at her brother. "Tim, Gloria is a beautiful woman, and you're damn lucky to have her." "I know, sis, but it would be even better if my secretary wanted to make a deal like that," Tim grinned, then quickly said, "I'm just kidding. Gloria is more than enough woman for me. Besides, she'd cut my balls off if I suggested something like that." That satisfied Thelma, and she smiled. Then we went back to the agreement. One of the points of the agreement was that we would try to organize our sexual encounters so that they would take place on days when Lisa would be on business trips. Of course, at first this stipulation had to be changed so that we could have sex when Thelma was most fertile. Thelma, to my delight, looked adorable in her plush clothes that first night. Her body was voluptuous and warm. We were both so turned on. Thelma cummed almost as soon as I slipped my finger into her moist vagina. I was so horny that I come within a minute when I first entered her. We took our time after that, and by morning we were both full and a little sore. In the office, Thelma and I maintained a completely professional relationship. Thelma also told anyone who would listen that she was done with dating, but that she intended to get pregnant artificially. 3 months after our first meeting, Thelma called me and told me she was pregnant. We maintained our sex life as long as possible throughout the pregnancy. When Thelma went to the hospital to give birth, I was somewhat upset that I couldn't be present. But we both realized that with Lisa at home, it just wasn't possible. Nevertheless, as soon as it was possible, I drove to the hospital to see both Thelma and my new son, Gavin. We agreed on a name, it was her grandfather's. 18 months later Jennifer was born, and that's when Thelma asked if I would agree to let her be a stay-at-home mom. She said she had enough money to last 5 years, and by then both kids would be in school. I told her I was very excited for her to be able to be with our kids full-time. I even arranged to pay Thelma's mortgage and utilities from a fund I had secretly set up. As it turned out, we hadn't planned to have children, but one of Lisa's trips fell during Thelma's ovulation. Apparently, she had counted the days wrong. Anyway, one day she called me in tears to tell me she was pregnant. Thelma was afraid I would get mad at her. Instead, I told her that I loved her and all my children. Scotty was born while Lisa was on a business trip, so I had the opportunity to be present in the delivery room when my son came into the world. I was so happy I was floating on a cloud for days. Before the birth of our third child, Thelma and I decided that we would have nothing more. The question was whether to get me a vasectomy or Thelma a tubal ligation. We decided to flip a coin. It turned out that the coin fell out and Thelma had her tubes tied. Life was going great until Lisa's travel schedule suddenly stopped. This put a kink in Thelma and I's plans. If Lisa wasn't running off to cheat on Gerard, then it was ridiculous for me to run off to cheat on Thelma. I know it doesn't make sense, but if you think about it, our whole situation makes no sense. As long as Lisa didn't curtail her journey, she seemed happy, I was happy, and Thelma was thrilled. As the weeks turned into months, both Lisa and Thelma became more and more upset with me. Lisa wanted me to do more things with her. She said we had grown distant from each other and she wanted to rebuild the relationship. Thelma was upset and unhappy that we hadn't made love in almost 6 weeks. I was still having sex with Lisa, but I felt guilty about it, so sometimes I didn't do it well or at all. My life was in deep shit and I didn't know what to do to untangle it. I came home that day and discovered that Lisa had found out about my cheating. I think you're right, we should probably get a divorce, I said, feeling relieved that maybe this was a way out of my predicament. Lisa looked at me with total shock and burst into tears. Lisa said she loved me and didn't want a divorce and then ran off to our bedroom. Her reaction took me by surprise. I followed her to continue the conversation and found her lying face down on our bed crying. I sat down next to her and pulled her to me. You were right, Lisa. We've been drifting apart for years. I thought you wanted a divorce. No, I don't want a divorce, she managed to. Oh, mumble. Then why did you bring it up? I asked, completely confused. I thought it would shock you and you would realize that we need to work on our marriage, Lisa said between sobs. Oh, I said, trying to think of what to say next. Listen, Lisa, I said, nervously running my fingers through my hair. I've known about your affair with Gerard for years. I just thought you were ready to commit to each other now. Oh God, no, she gasped. Why didn't you ever say anything? At first I was in so much pain that I intended to meet with you and ask for a divorce, I explained. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I would be hurting myself financially. But even more than that, I still loved you very much. However, I was in so much pain that I was almost ready to start divorce proceedings. But then a woman in my office convinced me that there was another way. Lisa was struggling to make sense of the whole situation. Until today, she had never suspected that I knew about her affair, and she had never even guessed about mine until recently. So you have a mistress? Lisa cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. You lousy bastard. Get out and leave me alone. The situation was getting more unbelievable by the minute. Why the hell was she mad at me for having an affair when she'd had one before I had? I decided this was the perfect opportunity to make a hasty retreat and spend some time with Thelma and the kids. The situation was so bad that I couldn't believe it could get any worse. But I was wrong. When I showed up at Thelma's house, she jumped on me. Before I could explain what was going on, she dragged me into the bedroom, and we had sex twice within 15 minutes. We finally spoke when Thelma, coming off her climax, lay down next to me. I thought you'd lost interest in me, she replied meekly. Now that Lisa was around all the time, I decided you didn't need me anymore. I was going crazy thinking about how I was going to live without you. I then told Thelma about the strange conversation with Lisa and her emotional outburst. That, in turn, made Thelma cry. My head was spinning so fast I was starting to get dizzy. So, why are you crying? I asked when she finally calmed down a bit. Because it's obvious she's still madly in love with you and will do anything to get you back and keep you. That doesn't make any sense, I protested. First of all, Lisa told me to leave. Second, she's been in a happy love relationship for 8 or 9 years. How can she be in love with me? I don't know, Thelma cried. But something's changed, and she definitely wants to keep you. It's not fair. She threw you away, and I want you. Nothing else made sense, so I kissed Thelma, made love to her again, and then went to bed. In the morning we made love again, and I went to the office. Maybe there I could make sense of the mess my life had become. But you know the expression, the best laid plans of mice and men? Well, that morning it was on full display. When I arrived at work, Lisa was sitting in my office and didn't look happy. Good morning, Lisa, I said uncertainly. I don't remember you coming to my office before. So why are you here today? You know exactly why I'm here, Lisa snapped back. We need to discuss your affair. With that, I quickly closed the door and returned to my chair. Okay, what do you want to discuss? For starters, who is she? Her name is Thelma Johnson, and she used to work for me. Wait, didn't you hire a private investigator to follow me around or something? No, one of my friends saw you playing kissy face in a restaurant the other day. My friend tried to follow your girlfriend after you gave her a passionate kiss, but lost her. Do you intend to continue seeing her? Oh my God, was all I could say. Well, do you intend to continue seeing her? Lisa, you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you, but you need to hear it. After I tell you everything, I think you'll agree that we need to get a divorce. Lisa's eyes reflected sadness, but she nodded. If you had continued your trips, we wouldn't be having this conversation, I began. What does my traveling have to do with this? Asked Lisa sharply. I already told you that I know about your affair, Lisa, I said sharply. I know you've been seeing Gerard on your trips. So Thelma and I have been seeing each other while you've been away. You know what's good for the goose is good for the gander. My attempt at humor went over well. So I decided to continue. I decided that since you were having an affair, so was I. I tried to limit my sexual encounters to periods when you weren't home. But we did have extra sessions when Thelma was fertile so she could get pregnant. You have a baby, shouted Lisa, jumping to her feet. Please lower your voice and sit down, I demanded. No, we don't have a child, we have 3 children. Before you start, you know that I've always wanted children and you haven't. After several long minutes of me trying to get Lisa to respond, she said, I understand. I need to think about all of this. With those words, she got up and left. I figured it would take the company's lawyers a day, or even 2, to prepare the divorce papers. During that time, I decided not to take any chances, since Lisa was angry, and stayed with Thelma. This night with Thelma was a welcome relief, and yes, she fucked my brains out. And yes, I loved every minute of it. But the next morning, I got a call from Lisa at the office. I figured it was a courtesy call to let her know that divorce papers were on the way. However, what Lisa had to say was the last thing I expected. She wanted to meet Thelma and my children. Listen, Lisa, I said stiffly. I know you're mad at me, and we can argue about how justified this is, but I'm not going to let you drag my kids into this. And I'm certainly not going to let you bully them or Thelma. David, she said calmly, I swear by all that is holy, I will do nothing to embarrass, insult, humiliate or in any way harm your children, Thelma or you. I do want to meet your children and am desperate to talk to Thelma. In addition, I will have a fully registered nanny to watch the children while we talk. After we meet, if you wish to proceed with the divorce, I will more than honor our agreement. I thought about it for a while and decided that meeting Lisa was the best way to settle things as quickly as possible. However, if Lisa did anything to upset my kids or Thelma, things would get ugly fast. Look, I have to ask Thelma, I said, but if she agrees, when and where do you want to meet? How about coming to our house at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning? Thelma wasn't thrilled about seeing Lisa. She thought that if I saw them side by side, I would realize how much better Lisa was. I just rolled my eyes and told her it would be the quickest way to end the divorce. The next day I took Thelma and the 3 children to Lisa's and my house. I could tell that Thelma was totally intimidated by the house and the size of the estate. The kids were thrilled because I told them there was a pool, a game room, and an ice cream bar. I rang the bell instead of just walking in like I usually do. I was surprised when Lisa opened the door. There were at least 3 servants in the house during the day, and they usually opened the door. David, Lisa said with a smile, you don't have to ring the bell to enter your own home. I wasn't sure what kind of reception awaited me, I replied meekly. Lisa introduced us to a burly middle-aged woman who seemed very pleasant. This is Helen, Lisa introduced the nanny. She's going to take the kids to the pool. We'll sit in the kitchen where you can watch them too. Once in the kitchen, Lisa offered us something to drink. I was desperate for whiskey, but considering why we were here, I asked for Pepsi. Thelma took a glass of water, and Lisa poured herself a glass of wine. I remember thinking that wasn't fair. If I had known there were alcoholic drinks on the menu, I would have ordered them differently. Thelma, Lisa began, David told me that you've been together for about 8 years? As much as we could, Thelma replied nervously. David insisted that we only meet during your trips. However, he often stopped by for an hour or two to spend time with the children. He always managed to attend all the children's parties. Lisa threw me a strange look. So you were happy with David? You don't want to find someone to be a steady husband? David is the best man I've ever known, Thelma declared authoritatively. He's a better part-time husband and father than, I think, 95% of full-time men. So to answer your question, I don't want a full-time husband. I want whatever David is willing to give me. I see, Lisa said, a tear rolling down her face. She quickly wiped it away and turned to me. David could watch your kids and give Thelma and me some time alone. I looked at Thelma, and even though she was very nervous, she nodded at me. I was wearing shorts because I was taking the day off, so I threw off my sandals and dipped my feet into the pool. I watched the kids splashing around and couldn't help but wish Lisa hadn't wanted kids and cheated on me. From time to time I looked out the kitchen window. At first it seemed like Lisa was doing all the talking. Then Thelma was talking, and Lisa seemed to be crying. Then they talked again and again, and Thelma seemed to be writing. Finally I saw both women hugging each other and crying. Lisa opened one of the casements and motioned for me to go back into the house. I was almost afraid to go. Once inside, I made my way to the chair I had occupied earlier. I wondered if alcoholic drinks were still on the menu, but decided not to push my luck. David, Thelma said, taking my hand, we've come to an agreement. Okay, I said slowly. Is it something I won't like? We'll let you decide, Lisa said. We agreed to S. Separate you. Talk about being blindsided. I came in this morning expecting to have to discuss the details of my and Lisa's divorce. And now I've been told that the two women in my life want to separate me. I'm not good at this, I said, pushing my chair back slightly. Lisa, you cheated on me for almost 9 years. And yes, I cheated on you for almost as long, but you started it. I don't understand why you don't want to be with Gerard all the time. If you divorce me, you are free to do so. Lisa started crying and Thelma slapped my arm. Why did you hit me? I demanded. I was even more confused and a little angry. Because Gerard is dead, Thelma said. Oh, I'm sorry, I mumbled. I didn't realize. David, you're right, I cheated on you, Lisa admitted. Gerard was my first love, and I couldn't get over him until I met you. He broke up with me when I told him I didn't want children. I was crushed by his decision, but I refused to back down. About 3 years after we were married, I ran into Gerard on one of my trips. His wife had died and he was devastated. I wanted to be there to help him through this difficult time. He really loved Therese. Anyway, one thing led to another and we began an affair. Yes, I loved Gerard, but I loved you as much as him, maybe more. When Gerard had his massive heart attack, he pressured me to divorce you and marry him. I told him there was no way I was leaving you. I loved you too much. Now I couldn't bear it if you left me, David. And I know you still love me, even though you had a family with Thelma. So you know it's possible to love two people at the same time. I realize now that I can't have you all the time, but I, like Thelma, need everything you're willing to give me. I exhaled air and slumped down in my chair. I know this is just a dream for a lot of guys, but all I saw was a potential nightmare. Everything in my body was screaming that two women wanting the same man was a recipe for disaster. I shifted my gaze from Lisa to Thelma and then back again. I saw hope and fear in both women's eyes. So I decided to play dumb. How exactly is this going to work? I asked. With those words, Thelma pulled out a notepad and started looking through the schedule. The agreement was quite detailed, but the gist of it was that Lisa would stay in the master bedroom. Thelma and the kids would stay in the north wing, which had 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. I would stay with Thelma on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday I would stay with Lisa. On Sunday, I could sleep wherever I wanted. Just because I slept with one woman or the other didn't mean that sex would be constant. That was decided between couples. However, if one of the women decided she didn't want to or couldn't have sex, I wasn't allowed to go to bed with the other woman. There were many other rules, but this was the basic agreement. I told them I needed to think about it. I was very wary of the whole idea. But both women insisted that it was either cohabitation or nothing. I didn't believe that. I was sure that either of them would be happy to take me on full time. But then I got paranoid. What if they were serious about cohabitation or nothing? Would I risk losing both women? Either way, I had to leave the next day, so I told them I'd give them an answer when I got back. I was surprised that I could work so effectively with such a monumental life change looming over my head. But after I finished my contract with Stellar Enterprises and was flying home, I realized why I was able to work on this trip. I had already made a decision. I had agreed to the deal. Thelma went back to her brother to draw up a new agreement. When Thelma told him what it was all about, his eyes bulged. After Thelma finished explaining the deal, his first comment was, "Fuck me with a crooked stick. David, I hate you with my whole being." Of course, I knew he was joking, so I responded with a joke. "You can still get yourself a mistress," I suggested and was immediately slapped by Thelma. "I wouldn't dare," Tim admitted. "Gloria would not only cut my balls off, she'd make me eat them." Up until almost 7 months, everything was going well. I can't say that my sex life became more intense. However, it has become more consistent. I have sex at least 3 times a week. But sometimes 4 or 5. Since the children were being looked after by a nanny, Thelma went back to work in my office. Lisa was a little worried at first, but then she rectified the situation to her satisfaction. Lisa hired Thelma from me, offering her a higher salary and better benefits. Thelma now works for Lisa and seems quite happy. About a week before the 7th month, these 2 women grabbed me as I was coming home from work. They explained that there was a problem with the contract and it needed to be changed. It went through my mind, oh my God, what now? Can my life get any more shitty? The answer was yes. Seating me at the dining room table, Lisa immediately explained the nature of the problem. "David, I want to have a baby." I know it's redundant to say that I was confused, but you've all realized by now that this is my normal state of mind when I live with these 2 women. If I had spent 1,000 years wondering what they wanted to talk to me about, I never would have guessed it would be about Lisa wanting to have a baby. "I know I said I didn't want kids," Lisa said quietly. "But I see how much fun you have with your kids. And I see how much they love you and how much you love them. I want that feeling, too." And what was I supposed to say? All I could think was, okay. That must have been the right answer, because both women squealed with happiness, hugging and kissing me. But then Lisa broke the amazing news. "Besides, David, Thelma and I have discussed it, and we agree that I shouldn't be married to you." Now panic was gripping me. It looked like these 2 women wanted me to get Lisa pregnant and then planned to kick me to the curb. I knew they had become close, but I didn't expect them to fall in love with each other and want to get rid of me. "Let's see if I got this right," I said, looking at Lisa. "You want me to get pregnant by you and then you both kick me to the curb. I don't think I want any part of that. If you want to get rid of me, just say the word and I'll peacefully walk away. However, if you guys think you're going to cut me off from my children, I will fight you to the last man." "What?" Thelma's voice rose 3 octaves. No, David, you've got it all wrong," Lisa said hastily, her face reddening. "It's my fault, I didn't explain it properly." "David, we don't want to get rid of you," Thelma said, rushing to hug me. "I love you with all my soul. It would kill me if you left." "David, I feel the same way," tears ran down Lisa's cheeks. "Well, then I haven't the faintest idea what you 2 are talking about," I said exasperatedly. "I need a drink." I didn't care that it wasn't on the menu. I think we should all have a drink, Lisa said, taking my hand. When we've all calmed down, I'll try to better explain what we want to do. But, David, I want you to understand that we will respect your decision, whatever it is. Okay, Lisa, I said, finishing my first scotch. First explain to me about the baby. Are you sure you want a baby? It's a radical change for you. Of all the things these women had discussed before our arrangement, having another baby was not one of them. But after seeing how much fun Thelma and I were having with our children, Lisa's biological clock apparently began to wind down. After a while, the desire to have a child of her own became irresistible. I had to change the arrangement so Lisa could have me more often, especially when she thought she might be fertile. I thought Tim was going to choke when we told him about the last change we needed to make. He kept saying how much he hated me until I reminded him what it was like with a newborn. It took 4 months, but eventually Lisa became pregnant and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Charlotte. She has her mother's eyes and my smile. Thelma and the children adore her. As for the divorce proposal, it was just another chapter in my crazy married life. When Lisa talked about not being married to me, it was just another piece of craziness in our ever-changing arrangement. Specifically, Lisa did not talk about getting divorced right away, nor did she talk about staying divorced. In one of their many conversations, Thelma said she was worried about the stigma of having children out of wedlock on her children. Lisa agreed with her and offered a solution. Remember, Lisa has tons of money, and money can buy just about anything. According to the new agreement, I was to divorce Lisa after the birth of our child. I was then supposed to marry Thelma, but Lisa was going to change the paperwork to show that we were married at the time our children were born. Thelma and I would then divorce and I would remarry Lisa. If you are confused, think about how I feel. Some of you are no doubt thinking about the money part of a prenup. Frankly, it never occurred to me, but it did to Lisa. She drafted the contract so that a change in status would not invalidate the original agreement. But by then, I didn't care about the money anymore. The original agreement guaranteed me at least $5 million. And over the years, I had invested wisely and accumulated another $6 million. Still, it was nice to know that Lisa was looking out for my interests. Shortly after Charlotte was born, I signed the divorce papers and married Thelma. I don't know how Lisa did it, but she got a marriage license and the records were changed to reflect my supposed marriage to Thelma. I asked Lisa why she didn't just amend the records without a marriage ceremony. I was answered that it was a woman's business, and I was silenced. I was married to Thelma for a year, then divorced and remarried to Lisa. After another year, I divorced Lisa and married Thelma. Don't ask me to explain why, they just told me that each of them liked being officially married to me. The only downside of having a baby was that Lisa's parents now wanted to visit more often to see their grandchild. It brought a zest to our lives, and I was sure Lisa's parents didn't buy the story Lisa was telling them about her administrative assistant always being on hand. Besides, I caught their looks when they didn't think I would notice. Lisa's mother had a look of admiration and her father looked at me with pure envy. You are probably wondering what the children think about this blended family. When they were little, of course, they didn't think anything of it. But as they grew older, they were told that their mothers were very good friends, and that I had been married to each of them at different times. They left the rest of it rather vague. When the kids become teenagers, I have no doubt they'll realize that our family isn't exactly ordinary. Tim calls me about once every 2 months to catch up on the news. I think he lives vicariously through me. I know the situation is totally screwed up, but I love my kids and my wife. Thank God we have enough money to make it all work. Like I said at the beginning, my life is fucked up, but fucked up in a very good way.